I would like to welcome all of you tonight to the Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District Board meeting on Wednesday, January 24th at 7:01 p.m. at the Bastrop Convention and Exhibit Center, 1408 Chestnut Street, Bastrop, Texas. We're delighted that you're all here tonight. I don't know if we have any special guests attending, but we are delighted that you're interested in the affairs of the district and appreciate your attendance tonight. Our first item is to consideration and possible action on the application for an operating and transporting permits filed by NDOT LP. We will hear oral arguments to a proposal for decision issued by the administrative law judge. And first up is NDOT, so I'll turn it over to y'all.
Mr. President, I'm going to recuse myself from this item.
All right. Consider yourself recused.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Russ Johnson. I'm here on behalf of NDOT along with my co-counsel, Stacy Reese. And as Greg, I'm sure, has told you, we're going to reserve some of our time for discussion for rebuttal. So I intend to make this as brief as possible. I've contemplated what I can say in a very short period of time that would help you understand how important it is to make the right decision this evening. And that's a challenge, given the fact that this process has a long history. It's nearly 8 years ago that NDOT filed its applications for permits before the district. 5 years ago, the NDOT group completed extensive hydrogeologic testing that they delivered to the district in the hopes of addressing the district's concerns about the impact of their proposed production. So keep in mind that NDOT has, from the beginning, respected both the board and the board's decisions, and patiently worked through the process with you in an effort to get to a correct result. As you know, and I won't go through the long procedural history of this application, but as you know, when the district decided to begin processing applications, your general manager recommended the granting of this permit in the amount that had been applied for of 56,000 acre-feet, with conditions to the permit that I believe you've included on other permits, but basically would require that we undertake the effort to develop this permitted well system and develop a customer within a certain time period. And that, most importantly, we recognize that these permits would be subject to reduction in the future in the event the production of not only NDOT but others required that there be some kind of curtailment. That, despite the fact that the studies and the evidence, frankly, is that this is an incredibly sustainable supply that will meet this region's needs for the next 100 years, not just 50 years, but hundreds of years in a sustainable fashion. But here's what happened, and correctly so. The largest well owner by volume in the area that would be potentially affected by NDOT's applications protested the application. Aqua Water Supply. Many in the audience are probably customers. You may be customers of Aqua Water Supply. And their interest, and certainly justifiably so, was to ensure that their ratepayers, A, had continued access to the resource that they depended upon, but B, did not suffer economic adverse impacts associated with increased lift costs associated with drawdown. And let me just mention drawdown right up front. All well production in the Simsboro causes drawdown. Aqua water supply wells are causing drawdown, even as we speak, because that is the nature of the production of artesian water from an aquifer that deep, like the Simsboro. So, because of the protest by Aqua, we took advantage of the legislative provision that is included in Chapter 36 that was intended to make it easier for districts to address the thorny issues associated with permit applications, and that is a referral to the State Office of Administrative Hearings. An impartial judge has to consider all the evidence, your rules, and make a determination that is then referred back to you. And you're going to hear from Ms. Reese in connection with your obligations with regard to those decisions. But the whole point was the legislature understood that these decisions are difficult at the local level and often potentially not popular, and created a process where anyone with a contested case hearing could have their case heard by an impartial, objective, trained judge who would apply the district's rules and the law to the evidence that was presented. And that's exactly what happened here. Not one, not two, sound like LeBron James here, but 3 contested case hearings before this matter is before the board. And those hearings were hotly contested in connection with evidence of the impacts, potential impacts of production. Aqua Water Supply did settle with NDOT in connection with the permit applications and did several things to protect not only the ratepayers of Aqua, but the resource. They negotiated a reduction in the permit amount to 46,000 acre-feet. Part of the permit, part of the settlement agreement is that NDOT will not produce more than 35% of that amount of water from the Bastrop County well field, which will minimize impact to Aqua Water Supply customers. But most importantly, NDOT agreed to fund a 50-year insurance plan for every ratepayer of Aqua Water Supply to insure against the projected worst-case impacts, assuming everyone was producing 100% of the water, economic impacts to the ratepayers of the increased lift costs or rehabilitation of wells. 100% of those costs for the next 50 years will be funded by NDOT pursuant to that settlement agreement. But we didn't stop there. Every other well owner potentially affected is eligible to participate in a mitigation fund that will be funded by NDOT that is available to address the economic impact, known economic impact of reduction in artesian pressure and drawdown. So I won't bore you with reading the findings. I think it's important, though, for you to take note of the key findings of the judge. And one of them, I think, just stands out. And that is that this resource is capable of producing all of this water, all projected demand, all permit amounts for the next 50 years without unreasonable impacts, assuming the permit conditions that are part of this recommendation are included with the permit. And that the resource can be depended upon by the region on a sustainable basis for the next 50 years with this proposed production and all other assumed proposed production. Now let me leave you with this, and I think it's the most important thing, and that is that this decision obviously is important to this region. And NDOT understands that and wants to be a partner with this district in ensuring that the long-term health and reliability of this resource is preserved. But it's not just important for this region and this district. I believe your decision will determine the future of local control of groundwater in Texas. And here's what I mean by that. The legislature understood how difficult these decisions would be for you and provided a mechanism called the contested case hearing process with professional judges to give you the opportunity to address these questions through the objective lens of the State Office of Administrative Hearings. And they did that recognizing how difficult it is for you to make the right decision. In the event you depart from what this judge has found in any significant way, you are basically telling the legislature that we're not going to play by the rules, that we're not going to respect the law and the process, and most importantly, we're not going to pay attention to what a professional has determined based upon a complete record. And when I say a complete record, I mean everything you've ever heard about the impact of production from the Simsboro Aquifer was presented to this judge. He had it all. That's how important your decision is this evening. Because I am absolutely certain the state recognizes the importance of striking the balance between preserving the resource and producing from that resource to sustain the state of Texas. Thank you.
At this time, we'd like to hear from the general manager. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Robin Melvin, and I'm representing